Late at night, when the world slept, only the steady rhythm of breathing broke the heavy silence. Charlotte lay motionless, crushed by the oppressive closeness of that breath. That breath belonged to Raphael Astridla Ludovica, the Grand Duke, all chiseled features, aquiline nose, and a forehead that spoke of aristocratic calm. He was the Emperor's nephew, a celebrated war hero, the continent's sole sword master, and commander of the Black Dragon Knights whom Charlotte served. Charlotte couldn't fathom why a man of his rank used a subordinate as a makeshift pillow. The habit baffled her and she resolved to investigate. Raphael's weight pinned her. With no other option, Charlotte prepared to use her last-ditch trick to escape the bed. After a day spent scrubbing the office for her exacting superior, Charlotte began to pat him gently, hoping to deepen his sleep. Amazingly, a few light pats soothed the stern Grand Duke, and he slipped into a deeper, untroubled sleep. At last freed from that nightly torment, Charlotte rose on tiptoe and tried to steal away without a sound. Just as she reached the door, a sudden noise made her start and cry out in alarm. Her wig slipped, revealing a cascade of pink hair. Panic seized Charlotte. She decided she had to abandon the Black Dragon Knights at once. Raphael clutched the fallen wig and refused to release it. With no time to argue, Charlotte sighed and left it behind. At the window she paused, glanced back one last time, and quietly bid the Grand Duke farewell, certain they would never cross paths again. She mouthed a silent thanks for all he had done and melted into the cloak of night. Behind her, Raphael repeated her parting words softly, "We will not meet again," his face unreadable and thoughtful. He murmured Sasha's name and resolved to wait, curious whether her confident claim would hold true. The tale rewinds to the ancient Brabant Count family, where two daughters were cherished and raised like priceless gems. The elder, Grace, was brilliant and poised to carry the family's legacy as heir. The younger, Charlotte, was headstrong and free, an unconventional lady who excelled at the sword. Charlotte declared with certainty that she alone would narrate the course of her life. Although they lost their mother early, their father showered the sisters with devotion, raising them with every advantage. Charlotte once believed their future would be nothing but sunlit days and uninterrupted joy. But when she was 13, everything shattered. Their father died suddenly on a storm-lashed afternoon. The loss stunned Charlotte, and an even harsher truth began to unfurl in her mind. She realized with a jolt that she was living inside the novel she'd obsessed over in her past life. Frightened, she turned to her sister for counsel, knowing the story's outcome promised no happiness. The book was a tragedy detailing the brief, beloved life and death of Grace. That sorrowful romance, The Rose of Brabant, had been Charlotte's constant reading. In the novel, Grace and a commoner knight named Ethan were passionately in love, dreaming of a future together. After their father's death, the plot turned toward calamity, and their hopes began to unravel. To salvage the family's fortunes, Grace reluctantly renounced Ethan and accepted a political marriage to an elderly noble. Ethan was crushed but powerless, watching her go before volunteering for a distant campaign. Time passed. When Grace received news that Ethan had died in battle, she chose to end her own life to follow him. Charlotte clung to her sister and wept, while Grace vowed gently to protect her at any cost. Charlotte sobbed Grace's name, her heart tightening at the thought of the bleak future ahead. Even knowing this was a book's plot, her sister's warmth and embrace felt utterly real. All the tragedy began after their father's death, but Charlotte believed she might still rewrite their fate. She vowed, by any means necessary, to prevent the political marriage and give Grace the love she deserved. Reality, however, cooled her plans. Despite repeated attempts, she could not alter the course of events. For years after making that vow, Charlotte had achieved nothing to change the looming future. She had tried sending letters that revealed the future, but Grace dismissed them as childish pranks and ignored every warning. Charlotte planned to finance the family herself, yet the mineral deposits she remembered from the book were already owned and controlled by others. One scheme after another collapsed for a dozen different reasons, leaving Charlotte exhausted, frustrated, and increasingly helpless. With the estate slipping into ruin and Ethan long absent, Charlotte redoubled her training, driven by urgency and fury. Bleary and disoriented, she nearly jumped out of her skin when Johann suddenly stepped into the yard and called her name. Johann strode up and demanded, half amused, half exasperated, what on earth she was doing swinging a wooden sword at this hour. Johann Albrecht had been Charlotte's childhood companion, heir to the famed Albrecht School of Swordsmanship and raised to bladecraft excellence. He explained he'd come to check because she often practiced in his family's training yard and he worried when he didn't find her earlier. Charlotte blinked, still fogged with fatigue, and wondered why Johann had suddenly shown such unusual concern. Johann delivered the blow. He'd heard rumors that Grace and Duke Hermann were negotiating a marriage. The news went through her like ice. Her knees wobbled as she begged Johann to tell her where he'd heard such a thing. Panic flared. If Johann knew, the match couldn't be far off. All Charlotte's worst fears felt suddenly imminent. After 4 years of futile attempts, she resolved to take extreme action. Passive hope had failed them all. Her plan was grim and simple: send the old Duke to his grave herself if that was what it took to save Grace. Johann lunged between them in time, scolding her fiercely. Swordsmanship was not a tool for murder or desperate vengeance. Anger flared. Charlotte snapped that if he intended to stand idly by while his friend's sister was handed to a man old enough to be her grandfather, then he should say so. Johann urged her to calm down and insisted his family was doing everything they could behind the scenes to block the match. Still, Duke Hermann's political clout ran deep. Age had not diminished his power or reach. He had leveraged that influence to pressure the Brabant family into accepting the political marriage. Worse, as the Emperor's father-in-law, Hermann's position made resistance dangerously complicated for Charlotte's family. Charlotte didn't object to marriage in principle, only that Grace be happy, but she could not, under any circumstances, accept that old man's claim. Johann asked if she intended to plead with Grace directly, but Charlotte knew all too well that once Grace resolved something, she was immovable. In a desperate pivot, Charlotte remembered the one person who could soften Grace's heart, Ethan. She cried out with sudden hope: if Ethan returned and begged, perhaps Grace would abandon the arranged match. To find Ethan, she would have to seek out the Black Dragon Knight serving Grand Duke Ludovica, the last known thread to him. Charlotte began recalculating contacts and routes. The plan to locate Ethan through court connections suddenly felt practical. Because Grand Duke Ludovica had once been Johann's father's pupil, she saw an opening: use that old bond to gain access. Grasping Johann's sleeve, she asked point-blank whether he had business with the knights. He admitted he had an appointment next week. Seizing the rare opportunity, Charlotte begged to accompany him, insisting this was their one chance to find Ethan. She told herself there was no time to lose. This was the final plan left to rescue her sister from that fate. She dubbed it the final operation, brimming with the reckless confidence that this attempt would finally alter destiny. In her laser focus on saving Grace, she overlooked a perilous fact: she was about to confront the most powerful Grand Duke alive. Charlotte set about drafting a meticulous plan, mapping each step and contingency for the daring infiltration ahead. Her idea was to pose as a newly assigned escort knight and travel with Johann to the Grand Duke's manor to gain entry. While Johann engaged in formalities, she would slip away to the knight's quarters and search for Ethan to plea for his help. If Ethan could convince Grace to choose him, the political marriage would be undone and Charlotte's mission would succeed. She extolled the plan's brilliance, breathless and reckless, convinced the risks were worth securing her sister's happiness. Charlotte, triumphant, asked Johann his opinion, only to be cut short by the voice of her master answering for him. She screamed in surprise when her master materialized behind her, face dark with anger. After a stern reprimand for daydreaming on duty, Charlotte rode home in a sullen, rebellious mood. She seethed silently at Johann, branding him a cowardly betrayer for running to their master and spilling her secret plan. Her master chastised her for treating the Grand Duke's manor like a playground and strictly forbade any rash acts. He ordered patience, promising that next week he would personally seek out Ethan and settle the matter. Near her gate, Charlotte froze at the sight of an unfamiliar, opulently appointed carriage waiting by the road. It struck her as peculiar. Visitors rarely came at dusk, respectable guests arrived in daylight. Charlotte wondered who would call at such an inconvenient hour and whether the visit concerned the engagement. A voice inside made her blood run cold. The distinguished visitor was Duke Hermann himself. Hearing Grace agree to his terms, Charlotte scrambled for a hiding place so she could overhear the rest. The old man cloaked his intentions in false gentleness, insisting it was a family affair and Grace could choose the timing. Grace suggested postponing the announcement until after the autumn harvest if the Duke preferred. Hermann's smile sharpened. He asked pointedly whether she planned to wait until after Charlotte's coming of age. Grace conceded the timing but insisted the exact date mattered little so long as the engagement occurred. The old man stepped forward, laid a rude hand on Grace's shoulder, and declared she was already like family to him. He grandly promised to look after Charlotte as if she were his own and theatrically vowed not to spoil her special day. He instructed Grace to prepare for the engagement and assured her he would manage the thornier political details. Once the carriage departed, Grace remained in the yard, pale and hollow-eyed, the encounter written across her face. Without warning she collapsed, and the servants rushed to her side. She was utterly spent, drained to the bone. Through a forced smile, Grace vowed to hide the engagement from Charlotte and dismissed her sister as foolish. Charlotte sat with her head bowed beside her mare, each breath a stab as she realized how deeply Grace had shielded her. Silently she swore that if Grace could be spared pain, she would endure anything and do whatever it took to save her. Horror flooded her when she learned the engagement would be announced immediately after her coming-of-age ceremony. She forced herself calm. Official papers had not been signed. There was still time if she hurried to find Ethan. Bolstered by desperate confidence, she crowed to herself that she was clever enough to pull it off. The knights bowed and apologized. The Marquis had issued a strict order forbidding Lady Charlotte from traveling to the Grand Duke's manor. She slumped to the floor, feeling like a trapped mushroom, stuck in Johann's house, furious and helpless as they waited for the Marquis. Then it clicked. She had been watched because wanted posters bearing her likeness had been plastered across the county. Stunned, she realized with bitter disbelief that her own master had authorized the manhunt. Pursued though she was, she refused to surrender. Sasha resolved to march on foot for a week if need be to reach the Grand Duke. Seizing a careless moment by the Marquis's patrols, she slipped out and vanished into the night. She headed straight for the Grand Duke's manor, fretting over how to navigate the plastered wanted bills and watchful eyes. Charlotte smugly trusted her disguise, convinced no one could identify the woman beneath the ruse. A wig hid her hair and a false beard masked her features. After a week on the road she believed no one would trace her steps. Originally she had planned to rely on Johann's introductions, but now she would register in person and hope the vetting moved quickly. She froze at the sight of a vast crowd clustered before the manor gates, unsure how to wedge her way through. Watching the guards, she saw they were rigorously screening entrance and admitting only those cleared. The people in line didn't look like invited guests. They were applicants and hopefuls, not courtiers. She hesitated, torn between blending into the queue and risking exposure or searching for another way in. When the herald announced that only the inspected would be admitted, she swallowed and joined the line. This was her last, slim hope. She darted forward to register and drew a waiting number, heart hammering as she clutched the slip. A posted notice made it plain. This queue was for the entrance examination to join the Black Dragon Knights. Holding number 87, she watched despairingly as many hopefuls were dismissed outright and wondered if her turn would come. Suddenly a man was hurled through the air, and Charlotte gasped, horrified and bewildered at the violent spectacle. She recoiled at the realization that candidates were being culled by a frantic palm inspection, an alarmingly brutal screening. When whispers spread that someone had been disqualified for concealing a poisoned blade inside a fake beard, panic tightened around her disguise. She tore off the false beard on impulse to avoid catastrophe, startling the person beside her with the sudden reveal. As the examiner finally appeared, curiosity prickled through the crowd. Everyone wanted to see the powerful figure who had kept them waiting. Her breath stalled when the approaching examiner came into view. She froze at the sudden intimacy of the encounter. He had jet black hair and startling blood-red eyes, handsome in a predatory way. His presence sent a chill through the line. Charlotte trembled. His direct stare carried a cold, unnerving intensity that made her hands go numb. She forced herself to breathe slowly and act submissive and composed until her number was called. When number 87 was announced, she sprang forward, heart pounding, ready for the inspection. Her plan was simple: appear harmless and unremarkable so they would find no pretext to reject her. Facing the Grand Duke, she obeyed when he ordered her to lift her chin so he could study her face. She deployed the Brabant tactic, an innocent, angelic smile meant to disarm and charm. Instead of melting him, his cold red eyes flicked over her and he pronounced her rejected on the spot. Charlotte stood dumbstruck as he barely acknowledged her and casually called the next candidate forward. Devastation washed over her. Being dismissed at the first hurdle felt unbearably unfair. The scene skated on the edge of dark comedy, her radiant smile clashing grotesquely with his blank dismissal. She protested loudly, insisting she hadn't been properly examined and pointing out she had no beard or suspicious items. He shrugged, unmoved. Her smile read as counterfeit and disagreeable, he said, and that was reason enough. She demanded a fairer test, but he dismissed her pleas as unnecessary and waved her away. He gestured for Romeo to escort her off to continue processing, but she planted her feet and refused to budge. Refusing to accept such a perfunctory end, Charlotte's mind raced. A fresh idea began to form. She flopped dramatically to the ground and screamed that she wouldn't leave until he examined her palm. The Grand Duke regarded her with mild surprise. Ordinarily the rejected retreated without a fuss. Her obstinacy made him suspicious. What drove someone to fight so fiercely for entry to his manor? As tempers flared and a scuffle threatened, Romeo hurried forward to defuse the situation. Romeo suggested indulging her briefly. There were important guests today. If she failed the palm check, he would accept it then. The Grand Duke found Romeo's logic sensible and agreed to grant her one final chance. Triumphant, Charlotte thrust both hands toward him and demanded a thorough examination. At first he assumed she was simply overzealous. Someone so brazen often proved harmless. But the instant his fingers brushed her palm, his expression shifted. He had noticed something unexpected. Up close he recognized the calluses and muscle memory of someone forged by brutal sword training. This was no ordinary hand. To Charlotte's astonishment, he reversed himself and declared that she had passed the inspection. She blinked in disbelief. He smirked and asked whether she preferred rejection over acceptance. Charlotte sprang up, elated, thanking fate, and the hands that had vouched for her, like a child given a prize. Romeo watched her with a flicker of doubt, wondering why he had suddenly allowed such a suspicious candidate through. He explained that someone with genuine skill might be more valuable alive and observed than dismissed outright. With a conspiratorial smile, he admitted he was curious which kind of spy the enemy would risk sending next. He reflected on the frequent plots against him. Being heir to power made him a perpetual target for assassination. Because assassins often employed seductive women, he had replaced most of his household staff and knights with men. He had even spread deliberate rumors about his preferences to throw would-be assassins off their game. The planted gossip, that Grand Duke Ludovica preferred men, had circulated far and wide. With seduction no longer a viable tactic, would-be killers began sending men instead of femmes fatales. Charlotte kept smiling innocently, unaware she had unwittingly walked straight into the Grand Duke's elaborate trap. The registrar rifled through the forms and asked her name to finish the registration. When she gave only the name Sasha, no surname, he shrugged and decided to call her by her registration number, 87. She felt a surge of luck. This queue led directly toward the Grand Duke's office, where knights frequently passed. Charlotte thrilled at the thought of meeting Ethan, even as she wondered why gaining an audience required such brutal hurdles. The officer snapped at her for daydreaming. The dangerous second trial still awaited. She was shepherded outside and ordered to wait until her number was called. Charlotte exploded in frustration, incredulous that so many life-or-death tests separated her from a single meeting. A man stepped forward and asked if she was the candidate who had just cleared the first trial. He introduced himself as Varon and commented that, though she looked young, she clearly shouldn't be underestimated. She replied brightly, "Sasha, number 87, but faltered when he mentioned preparation for the next round. Varon coldly explained that the next stage was a deadly team-on-team battle designed to leave only a few survivors. Her knees went weak as the truth sank in. Visitors were expected to fight to the death for an audience. Varon warned her this was the infamously ruthless Black Dragon Knights. Entry was never granted easily. The gravity hit her when she learned the order answered directly to Grand Duke Ludovica. Raphael Astrid Ludovica was a celebrated war hero, the emperor's grandson, and a dominant presence at court. Given his vast military clout and political reach, it made sense that his manor kept the strictest security. She forced herself to stop complaining. Every risk was for her sister's sake. When the second trial began, she vowed to fight with every scrap of strength she had. Others singled her out first. She looked the weakest, an easy target for bullies in the crowd. Something in her snapped, her gaze hardened, a lethal calm settling over her as she resolved to be first into the audience chamber. She launched herself into the melee with rimmed white eyes from sheer focus, whispering Ethan's and Grace's names like a prayer. Amid the chaos on the training field, Raphael apologized to the guests for the disorderly spectacle. Johann grinned, claiming that witnessing the Black Dragon trials was itself a rare honor. Johann's cheer evaporated when, a heartbeat later, he shouted in alarm at a familiar face in the fighting throng. He stared, incredulous, to see Sasha risking herself in such deadly surroundings. The Grand Duke noticed Johann's odd expression and asked, intrigued, whether he knew the foolish-looking combatant. When he learned she was tied to Johann's master, doubt flickered across his face. This connection mattered. A dangerous smile curved the Grand Duke's lips. The situation had become far more compelling. He wondered, aloud, who would send such a dull-faced spy into his midst. The trial concluded swiftly. Sasha emerged victorious, one of only 3 to survive the round. Varon introduced himself with the easy air of a seasoned mercenary, confidence ringing in his voice. Klaus stunned everyone with wild, unpredictable swordwork that defied convention. Sasha matched him blow for blow. Her strikes were crisp, decisive, and quickly earned wary respect. Exhausted, she collapsed after the bout, protesting at the thought of a third trial and fretting over when she'd finally meet Ethan. Just as discouragement threatened, something glittering caught Sasha's eye repeatedly until she noticed it properly. It was the Albrecht family crest clutched in Johann's hand. His face went pale with shock and worry. Despite the pressure, Sasha's jaw set with resolute determination as the contest tightened around her. Johann dragged her aside, scolding her for the recklessness of coming here and fearing discovery would endanger them all. Sasha brushed off his panic. Her disguise was secure, she insisted. The enchanted wig would not betray her. Johann exhaled in frustration, ordering her to stay put even as worry gnawed at him beneath the surface. Sasha snapped back at his constant fretting and demanded whether he had a better plan than this risky infiltration. Johann admitted it was the most reliable option but confessed his fear that if the Grand Duke discovered her true identity, she would be in grave danger. Sasha gave Johann a reassuring pat and said she understood his worries completely. She locked eyes with him and asked sharply whether anything mattered more than her sister's safety right now. Johann melted at her resolve and told her to speak up if she had any useful information. He warned that assassination attempts against the Grand Duke had surged, making access to knights and the manor dangerously restricted. Sasha accepted the need for tight security but remained baffled that she had to endure 3 brutal trials. As Johann questioned how she would escape once inside, a summons announced the start of the third round. She urged Johan to keep her presence secret, then dashed off to join the next test. Johan watched her go, anxiety sharpening his expression as he feared she might not be able to slip away from the order later. He stared up at the fortress-like manor and wondered how this reckless girl intended to desert the knights once she was inside. The third round opened formally. Sasha was paired with Varon and Klaus, both top scorers from the previous stage. Varon proved the archetypal mercenary, precise, efficient, and shockingly skilled in combat. Sasha hoped her new teammate's prowess would steady her and carry the team through the trial. When Varon teased her about running off, Sasha retorted firmly that she intended to be the first to step forward. A derisive snort from behind cut through the banter, and the mood tightened instantly. A stranger began baiting her, cynically invoking the Albrecht heir in a clear provocation. It was Vigran, the Egtra family's younger son. He claimed he'd seen her whispering with Johan and implied she had slipped in on someone's patronage. Relieved he hadn't overheard their plans, Sasha bristled at the accusation that she'd bought her way in. Vigran kept sneering, suggesting the judges might show her undue favor because of connections. He even mocked the common knight's merit and dragged Ethan's name into his taunts. Sasha said nothing at first, but anger cooled into a hard, steely glare. She told the knight to let his blade speak instead of his tongue. Klaus backed her, calling Vigran's conduct contemptible. Vigran opened his mouth to snap back, but an oppressive stillness fell over him before he could. He continued whining that she only advanced with someone else's help, oblivious to the shift in the air. In a blur, Sasha delivered a devastating kick that knocked Vigran off his feet and sent him reeling. He hit the ground hard, coughing and sputtering from the force of her strike. She warned she would have let it slide, until he kept insulting others and bragging without cause. With the judges not yet ready to resume, Sasha seized the lull to stir the crowd and burn time. Drawing her sword with calm precision, she challenged Vigran to prove his doubts in combat. Whispers rippled through the ranks. Talk of an eccentric from the first group who had set a record for match duration drew everyone's attention. Raphael leaned to his attendants and asked whether the disruptive contender had ultimately passed. A knight confirmed the wild card was contestant number 87, Sasha. Raphael strode into the training yard with such commanding presence that conversation died instantly. He fixed his gaze on the figure wearing number 87 and stated plainly that it was indeed Sasha. A flicker of worry passed through Sasha. If she had to face him directly, she feared she might not prevail. Observers could not stop praising the petite fighter's speed and flawless technique. After her decisive victory, Sasha shrugged with quiet confidence, showing no trace of exhaustion. A sharp voice ordered a halt. Sasha flinched. She recognized the tone immediately. Raphael sneered that she had an uncanny knack for attracting trouble wherever she went. Sasha froze. The judge overseeing this free fight was the very man she'd encountered before. She wondered why he had returned and whether he served as the official for the third round. Raphael answered only with an unreadable smile, which tightened Sasha's nerves. Sasha thought privately that he truly deserved the rumors of madness that trailed him. The word madman kept echoing in her mind, stirring a prickling annoyance she couldn't shake. Raphael snapped, asking if she dared call him a madman, then commanded everyone's attention. As the crowd hailed him Grand Duke, a cold dread slid through Sasha. Something was terribly off. Her world went white when she realized the man she'd sparred with was no ordinary noble but Grand Duke Raphael Ladovica himself. With a flash of amusement, Raphael announced he would take the first match against Sasha and asked if anyone objected. Panic surged through Sasha. She had never imagined the man she'd mocked led this fearsome night order. Their duel exploded into a torrent of blows so violent the very ground seemed to shudder. Raphael conceded her reflexes were decent, while Sasha recoiled at the unreal, terrifying power behind each of his strikes. He wielded the gargantuan greatsword with a one-handed grace that made raw strength look effortless. Confronted with that blend of speed and force, Sasha felt like she faced a living monster. Raphael taunted whether she was tired. Sasha knew any grazed skin would be fatal, so she could not afford a single misstep. Though outmatched, she steeled herself. Retreat was not an option after coming this far. She vowed to pass the test at any cost. The only prize that mattered was a meeting with Ethan. Throwing caution aside, Sasha risked everything in a desperate assault, convinced it was the only path to her sister's happiness. Raphael chuckled derisively and asked if she truly trusted her own speed against him. He called it madness to meet a great sword with such a light blade, belittling her choice. He mused she was either a fool who would fold quickly or a prodigy dangerously sure of herself. His crimson eyes glittered with equal parts delight and menace as he studied the tiny challenger. Amid the battlefield hush, Sasha planted her feet and assumed a resolute stance beneath the lethal air. She understood quickly that stalling tactics would fail against an opponent like Raphael. Determined, Sasha poured everything into a single decisive strike and shouted to unloose the tension. Witnesses gasped. The renowned Grand Duke was driven backward by the unassuming girl. Every thought narrowed to the blade. Her only goal was to land even a single touch on him. She stared, stunned, as he stopped her razor edge with nothing but his bare hand, cool and unflinching. Raphael offered a cryptic smile and conceded her last strike had been commendable. Without warning he crushed her wrist in a grip so fierce she cried out in pain. Sasha snapped at him for overdoing it. His hold nearly shattered her wrist. Anger flared inside her. She seethed at the absurd cruelty of enduring such trials merely for a meeting. Raphael gripped her face and bluntly told her worst fault was talking too much. He peered into her eyes and stated plainly that their paths would cross many times henceforth. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Sasha bewildered by his casual concern when he asked if her hand was all right. He ordered his men to detain her and placed her directly under his supervision. Varan hurried over, musing her hair and praising her boldness for standing up to the Grand Duke. Another knight stepped forward, congratulating her for being the first to overcome this brutal trial. Breathless, Sasha begged to finally be allowed to meet the person she had come so far to find. The knight straightened, preparing to make a formal announcement that left Sasha tense with anticipation. He smiled broadly and declared, to Sasha's disbelief, that she was officially welcomed into the famed Black Dragon Knights. For a stunned few seconds Sasha stood speechless. The outcome she wanted had twisted into something else entirely. Horror cracked her voice as she realized she had been enrolled as a knight, not admitted as a visitor. A grueling week unfolded after that fateful day, since she had been swept into the Order's ranks. Each morning the captain's thunderous shout jolted them awake to another merciless day of training. Sasha endured brutal drills every day, teeth clenched, driven solely by the hope of finding Ethan. She felt crushed by the routine, surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night and a mounting dread. When Sasha asked about Ethan, the reply stopped her cold. He was on a distant mission and wouldn't return until autumn. Despair washed over her at the thought of enduring this brutal place for months on end. They whispered that Ethan might be here. If news leaked that a Brabant lady had infiltrated the Knights, it would spark a scandal amid already high tensions. Her companion urged her to flee, but Sasha refused. She wouldn't leave until she found Ethan and insisted they keep the matter secret. Sasha vowed not to go anywhere until she even glimpsed Ethan. Desertion could wait. At that moment the trainer ordered the recruits to assemble. Instructor Aaron stepped forward to outline the 4 ranks of the Knight Corps. He detailed the hierarchy, from commanders to senior knights, mid-level and regular knights, down to the unranked trainees. Aaron announced senior knights would train them personally the next day, a revelation that tightened Sasha's chest. Her superior's caliber could decide her fate here. The first exercise was a perilous classic, leap through a blazing ring of fire. Sasha and the other recruits froze, incredulous. How did this stunt honor respect for elders? When Aaron asked for volunteers, the field fell silent. Sasha thought no sane person would raise a hand. As top scorer, Sasha was ordered to go first. Aaron's curt, no refusals left her muttering a curse under her breath. Aaron signaled her to jump. Sasha steadied herself, picturing her sister to summon courage. Mustering every nerve, Sasha launched through the ring of flame to stunned gasps. She briefly fancied herself brilliant. The recruits watched with bated breath, hardly daring to believe the youngster had pulled it off. The triumph lasted only seconds before flame caught her sleeve. Panic rippled through the ranks. Hands scrambled to help while Sasha rolled to smother the blaze, her mind silently begging for Ethan's return. Night settled. Behind closed doors a hushed, secret conversation unfolded. A subordinate reported to Grand Duke Raphael that no records of Sasha could be found in nearby villages. Raphael observed that Sasha fought without a killer's intent, unlike the assassins he had encountered. Though Sasha seemed useful, her obscure background left Raphael wary and suspicious. He ordered that, number 87, be kept close under observation until her true identity could be uncovered. By morning training's end the recruits were spent. Some muttered they'd rather die than endure another day. Haunted by the Ring of Fire ordeal, Sasha muttered that this felt less like a night unit and more like a circus. Told she'd meet her superior that afternoon, a flicker of excitement pierced Sasha's exhaustion. She realized being assigned as a senior knight's attendant would mean living and training constantly at that person's side. Sasha let herself daydream briefly of a kind, easygoing master who might soften the harshness of soldiering. She prayed to be matched with someone merciful so she could hold out until autumn. The scene shifted to the Grand Duke's stately office. Raphael appeared unexpectedly to greet her, freezing Sasha for a heartbeat. His questions dripped with innuendo. Sasha trembled like a leaf, bewildered by his tone. Her silence invited more probing. Only then did panic set in as she realized her superior was the Grand Duke himself. She hurried a greeting, still floored by his sudden presence and unclear intentions. Raphael declared he would punish her earlier insolence and ordered her to step closer. Sasha forced a nervous laugh, protesting it was a misunderstanding, then obediently edged forward. Fear tightened her chest. With those powerful arms, she imagined the Grand Duke could end her with a single movement. When Raphael asked whether she'd heard anything, Sasha flinched and answered dutifully. He pressed her about her commoner, familyless origins. Sasha confirmed the truth, voice barely steady. Asked her age, she replied she was 17, on the cusp of adulthood. The Grand Duke probed the supposed closeness between Sasha and Albrecht, eyes narrowing. Terrified, Sasha denied it immediately, insisting they were not close. She explained she only glimpsed Albrecht from afar during drills. How could a commoner befriend nobility? But Raphael received the answer with thin skepticism. Raphael frowned, sensing something amiss. Sasha, on edge, pressed him to explain. Without warning he tipped her chin up and observed that her complexion was far too refined for a mere commoner. His blunt question, "Who are you really?" made Sasha's pulse stutter. Fear of exposure tightened her throat. She forced calm, reminding herself he hadn't seen her true identity and resolved to keep up a bold facade. Adopting a flirtatious lilt, she shot back, teasing whether her skin looked so exquisite the Grand Duke needed a closer look. Raphael recoiled with disgust and ordered her to stop. Sasha exhaled, relieved she had deflected his suspicion. She chastised herself inwardly. She had narrowly escaped disaster. Her gaze drifted to a memo on the desk requesting an investigation of ancient ruins to the west. Those ruins had been sealed for generations by old and dangerous magic. Legend held that the entrance's warding would unleash monsters on any intruders. No one had breached the seal since the dynasty's founding. In the original record, the emperor once ordered the ruins open to flaunt imperial might. But the seal failed, creatures spilled out, townsfolk were slaughtered, and Ethan perished during that doomed expedition. Sasha's mind raced. Why was Raphael pursuing this earlier than the old timeline had dictated? She feared that altering the original sequence could trigger catastrophic consequences. Raphael caught her staring at the documents and tilted his head in question. He inwardly wondered what insight a common-born recruit could possibly have about those sealed ruins. When he asked if the ruins interested her, Sasha hastily apologized for lingering on the papers. She excused herself, saying it was her first time seeing the unit's mission orders and that her curiosity got the better of her. Again he cupped her cheek and declared that having her at his side would make things considerably more entertaining. A slow, knowing smile curved his lips as he anticipated how the situation might unfold. Cramped against him, Sasha could only stammer, pleading for a moment to collect herself. She inwardly flinched at his closeness, baffled and unnerved by his repeated touch. At that tense instant a knock sounded. A subordinate announced an urgent summons. Raphael bristled at the interruption. Sasha breathed a silent thank you for the reprieve. The attendant entered with a letter from the Emperor and offered an apologetic bow for the poor timing. Sasha moved as if to slip away, assuming this was a matter of state she should not witness. Raphael cut her off firmly, insisting there was no reason for her to leave. He halted her with a swift, unmistakable gesture. Before she could protest, he swept Sasha onto his lap and commanded that they read the letter together. She panicked, demanding to be set down, but Raphael ordered her to remain seated. He asserted his authority. His command overruled her protests and silenced her. Sasha surrendered to the moment, mentally wondering if Raphael had always been this flagrantly lecherous in the original tale. The official accompanying the letter halted, aghast, and asked Sasha to step aside so they could discuss state business. He could hardly believe the scene before him. His eyes betrayed a mix of shock and disapproval. With casual possession he announced he was quite taken with this child, and claimed he could not concentrate without her nearby. He waved the official on, telling him to speak freely. The matter was beyond Sasha's comprehension, he said. Deciding to play along, Sasha resolved to cultivate the Grand Duke's trust no matter his motives. She swore inwardly to serve as a devoted attendant while she waited for any sign of Ethan. She offered a bright, practiced smile that made Raphael flush with an unexpected agitation. Beneath the performance she steeled herself to stay safe until she could reunite with Ethan. Sasha felt a surge of nervous excitement. It was her first real task assigned by the Grand Duke. She vowed to play her part flawlessly to earn Raphael's complete confidence. The official, lowering his voice, quietly confirmed the circulating rumor that the Grand Duke favored men. He added that the Emperor had ordered the letter's directives to be executed immediately once verified. Realizing the Emperor was engaged in a precarious political gambit, Raphael's face went as cold as steel. He offered a composed smile and assured the official he would implement the order to the letter. Sasha slipped the letter from the pile and, heart pounding, discovered an immediate order to mobilize westward. The tone wasn't familial warmth toward a nephew. It read like an exile decree, dispatched to disgrace someone. The attendant also produced a ceremonial item meant to commemorate the Grand Duke's deeds. It was a finely crafted magical recording device, polished and ornately bound. When activated, the device projected the Emperor's likeness, offering a genial greeting directed at his nephew, Raphael. The Emperor lauded Raphael as the Empire's champion and loaded the ruins investigation with lofty expectations. Sasha's skin prickled. Something about the letter and the lavish magical gift felt deeply off. Publicly, people assumed the Emperor doted on Raphael, praising him despite his orphaned youth. On triumphant returns the Emperor made elaborate displays of favor, loudly parading Raphael's achievements for the Empire. But the letter and recorded message revealed a harsher truth. Any warmth evaporated the moment orders were issued. It read like a calculated push toward danger, an imperial directive that could send Raphael to his death. Sasha realized the Emperor's gestures weren't affection but tests designed to entangle or eliminate him. Raphael faced a cruel choice: defy the Emperor and be branded disloyal, or comply and walk into a potentially fatal expedition. The Grand Duke stood trapped. No decision offered safety, each path carried ruin. For an odd moment Sasha thought Raphael's expression bore a startling resemblance to her sister's. The official announced he would report back to the emperor that Raphael had promptly departed west. He said it with a self-satisfied tone, certain the emperor would be pleased by such swift compliance. Mention of the palace jolted Sasha. She suddenly recalled a vital detail she'd nearly let slip. This expedition would shatter her private plans and dredge up her sister's painful past. With the emperor's birthday looming and Raphael distracted, Sasha impulsively offered to assist, an opening she hadn't expected. She discreetly signaled Raphael, urging him to play along with her scheme in that very moment. Sasha pressed him to go along and dropped a veiled reminder about her birthday, to divert scrutiny. Raphael caught her meaning and replied softly, promising he would not forget her birthday. She recognized then that the emperor's true aim was to probe Raphael's loyalty and obedience. Determined, Sasha opted to distract the court and buy Raphael breathing room to decide. Her plan was audacious: seed a rumor that Raphael was infatuated with a young man, deflecting the emperor's suspicions. While Raphael stalled over the expedition, Sasha continued the ruse, steering conversation toward a carefully staged birthday gift. Without warning, Raphael bent and kissed Sasha, murmuring that he was a little preoccupied. The sudden kiss silenced Sasha. She stared, stunned and bewildered by the gesture. After dismissing the official, Raphael ordered his men to show special courtesy to this unexpected guest. Sasha inwardly admired Raphael's performance, so composed that it erased any trace of the earlier disruption. Beneath that calm, however, she was shaken by the abruptness of his kiss. She worried, wondering whether their relationship in the original timeline had been so comfortably intimate. Raphael praised Sasha's quick thinking. She had played her part far better than he'd expected. Still, he confessed he had been wary of her from the start, his suspicions never fully quelled. He noted, bluntly, that her speech and manner betrayed noble breeding despite her constant claims of common birth. Coldly, he demanded she state her true identity once again, no more evasions. Color drained from Sasha's face as she realized her performance had not fooled him as completely as she'd believed. Panic surged. If she couldn't produce a convincing story, she feared for her safety. In a raw moment of desperation she blurted that she'd slipped in to protect someone of great importance. Raphael pressed for a name, and Sasha realized a flippant lie would now seal her fate. She refused to betray that confidence. Silently, her thoughts went to her beloved sister. Sasha insisted the person she protected mattered as much as her own life and that she must remain with the night unit to shield them at all costs. With pleading eyes she begged Raphael for a single act of trust, just this once, let her stay. Raphael narrowed his eyes and asked sharply whether her theatrical display before the officials had been a calculated bid to curry his favor. Sasha protested, but Raphael pressed on, demanding to know what else could explain such an exaggerated performance. She faltered, flustered and scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't expose her motives. At last she admitted she had acted because he looked exhausted and she genuinely wanted to help. Raphael found it mildly amusing to be pitted by someone of unknown origin, but Sasha insisted her concern was authentic. He snapped that he did not need assistance and warned her bluntly to stop meddling in his affairs. The exchange jolted Sasha, reminding her sharply of the engagement secret she still had to hide from her sister. She found herself wondering, uncomfortably, whether this empire's celebrated hero was even fully human. When she asked him bluntly if he was human, Raphael answered only with an unreadable look. She argued that no matter how legendary he was, he remained an ordinary person entitled to weakness and support. Being ordinary, she said, meant he could and should accept help when burdened. Heroism didn't negate need. Sasha pressed him again, testing whether he grasped the point she was trying to make. Raphael watched in silence, his face unreadable as calculations and private stirrings played behind his eyes. He wondered, almost imperceptibly, if following her counsel might propel him to even greater heights. Still, He scolded her for disobeying the order to remain put and for presuming to teach a superior. Despite her reminder of their earlier agreement to overlook minor offenses, Raphael insisted on imposing a punishment. With a sly smile he mentioned the crocodile pen, a training exercise that sent a cold prickle down Sasha's spine. He ordered her to clean the crocodile pen. Sasha screamed in terror at the thought. She pleaded pitifully, but Raphael's decision stood. She would perform the humiliating, dangerous task. Watching her go, Raphael mused that she truly was a most peculiar creature. Left alone, he opened the Emperor's letter again and read it with methodical scrutiny. From the wording and tone he concluded the Emperor was a master at shaping public perception. He winced at the thought that the Emperor had sent his underage nephew to a merciless front lines. The realization of being maneuvered stung. He regretted relying on aid from someone whose background he couldn't confirm. He rubbed his temples, irritated by Sasha's bold words that nonetheless carried uncomfortable truth. Despite his misgivings about her origins, he resolved to keep her close. For now, observation felt wiser than banishment. Sasha worked in silence, tearless and numb, scrubbing amid the snarling crocodiles. When the unit trained, she slipped away under cover of activity to find a private spot to relieve herself. The stench overwhelmed her. She decided she could no longer tolerate the filth and needed to bathe immediately. Though she usually risked nocturnal baths in secret, this time the smell and grime made waiting impossible. She slipped into the sumptuous bathing chamber reserved for senior members of the unit. Surrounded by marble and warm steam, she couldn't help thinking the crocodile pen sentence had its unexpected perks. She luxuriated in the cool, fragrant water, letting the grime and tension drain away. Sensing she might not be alone, Sasha panicked and fumbled to clothe herself before discovery. Peering about, she found the chamber empty, no attendants, no guards, stillness pressing in. Just as she moved to slip away, a disembodied voice called, asking who was there. A figure lunged from the shadows and seized her, sending Sasha into a panic-stricken freeze. A silver-haired man stood over her, half-dressed and accusing. He suspected her of being an infiltrator. His grip was iron. He warned there were no other knights in the palace and demanded answers. He ordered her to stop struggling and name the mastermind behind her intrusion, his eyes narrowing as if he noticed something off. Seizing a sliver of opportunity, Sasha gambled on a desperate bid for escape. She struck decisively, aiming to wrench free from the stranger's hold. Their struggle toppled them into the steaming pool with a chaotic, splashing crash. Gasping, Sasha kicked and swam frantically, seizing the moment to flee toward the nearest exit. At that tense instant the bathroom door burst open and hurried footsteps thundered in. She froze, breath held, listening to the knights grumble about the brutal training regimen. They gossiped that she'd been sentenced to scrub the crocodile pen, so Sasha pressed herself flat against a jagged rock to hide. Their speculation, was she bathing or stealing food, made her stomach knot with fear of discovery. When they spotted movement and advanced to investigate, she silently begged them not to come any closer. Trapped with no escape, Sasha's heart lurched as one of them called her name aloud. A cold wave of despair washed over her. If they found her here, everything would collapse. Before she could move, the silver-haired man from earlier reappeared and seized her in a crushing grip from behind. A knight barged in and froze, utterly stunned by the tableau he found before him. He blurted the name aloud, Idris, then was quickly rebuked for making such a racket. The name hit Sasha like a blow. She went rigid when she heard it echo through the chamber. Idris Lachline, once a revered holy knight, now serving as deputy commander of the Black Dragon unit. He was Raphael's chief lieutenant. Sasha cursed her luck for being caught by someone so close to the Grand Duke. Idris ordered the men to keep absolute silence about what they'd seen, his voice low and uncompromising. Obeying at once, the knights melted away, leaving the bathing hall eerily quiet. When the last footsteps died, Idris beckoned calmly and told Sasha she could come out. She stepped forward, fumbling a grateful, awkward thanks as she rehearsed a plausible explanation. Idris cut her off with a single hard look that silenced every excuse on her tongue. He announced flatly that he already knew who she truly was, Miss Charlotte Brabant. Sasha's pulse stuttered. She had no idea how he had uncovered her secret so swiftly. She realized, with a sinking clarity, that once he knew the truth, feeble lies would mean nothing. Idris suggested they move to a more private chamber where they could speak plainly and without interruption. Sasha followed him, nerves coiling. She prayed inwardly he wouldn't march her straight to the Grand Duke. In a secluded room, Idris regarded her coldly and said whether he handed her over to Raphael would depend on her demeanor, then ordered her to sit. He bluntly demanded why she had disguised herself to infiltrate the Knights, leaving Sasha stunned and unable to invent a response. Before answering, Sasha nervously asked for permission to pose a single question to him. She wondered why he offered her a chance to speak instead of immediately condemning her under martial law. Idris surprised her. He said he'd been struck by her swordsmanship at a competition years ago. The memory flashed through Sasha, her reckless youth spent entering tournaments and testing blades. He admitted he'd identified her immediately, but one question still nagged at him. Why would a woman of obvious talent risk sneaking into the Knights unit? His curiosity asked, and Sasha found herself oddly inclined to trust him. She chose then to confess the truth about Ethan and her sister, leaving Idris to fall silent and ponder. Aware of the emotions involved, Idris asked bluntly whether her aim was to sabotage the impending wedding. He warned that risking life and reputation over such an act was wildly disproportionate. Idris outlined the enormous dangers to her family and dismissed her motive as naively sentimental. Sasha conceded he had a point. She had no credible defense to offer. Steeling herself, she admitted, even if it sounded selfish, she had a personal justification. For her, nothing mattered more than ensuring her sister's happiness. She insisted she had taken up the sword solely to protect the sister she loved. She declared she would sacrifice everything for that purpose, and Idris listened in contemplative silence. Then, unexpectedly, Idris revealed that Ethan would return in 2 months, news that stunned Sasha into stillness. He pledged to keep watch over her and ensure her safety until Ethan's arrival. He warned her to keep the matter strictly confidential. The instructions sent a dizzy thrill of relief through her. Sasha scrambled to express her gratitude, voice trembling as she thanked him for his mercy. She left with a new awareness. Idris now held leverage over her. He could hasten Ethan's return or cast her out at a word. He chose, for the moment, to defer confronting her about her true identity. Idris even granted her access to a private bath and offered to dispatch a letter to Johann, gifts Sasha received with overwhelming gratitude. Though she couldn't fathom his motives, Idris's favors made the rigid military routine feel suddenly more bearable. Training finally ended and Sasha was spent. Even lifting her spoon felt like hefting a lump of lead. Master Aaron snapped at the recruits for their sloppy manners, his reprimand sending a hush, and nervous tremors, through the mess hall. He warned that anyone who persisted would earn 10 hours on the dreaded invisibility bench, so Sasha hastily corrected her posture and manners. After the meal, Master Aaron announced the entire unit would assemble at the castle gate instead of the training field. For a moment Sasha let herself hope they might finally get a break after a month of relentless drills. Reality bit, the unit was being mobilized to receive a visitor of considerable importance. She wondered what sort of person could justify such a full-scale deployment of knights. A gilded carriage rolled into the square, cutting through the formation of knights standing at rigid attention. Sasha watched, curiosity and unease coiling in her chest. She had no idea whom they were about to receive. Grand Duke Raphael stepped forward to greet the visitor, his expression composed and serious. A pair of elegant shoes descended from the carriage, and the visitor spoke to Raphael with an easy, familiar warmth. The voice froze Sasha's blood. She recognized an acquaintance she had hoped never to meet again. Raphael greeted the guest with practiced courtesy, taking her hand in a formal gesture. The guest was Grand Princess Cordelia, breezy and teasing as she made a light quip about Raphael's mansion. Sasha felt despair tighten its grip. One trial seemed to bleed into the next without respite. She remembered Cordelia had been a judge at the very first sword tournament Sasha had entered. At that time the princess had just established the famed Scarlet Knights. Cordelia had taken an interest in Sasha and even tried to recruit her, but Sasha refused. She would not abandon her family. Cordelia had once cared for Sasha like a younger sister, and Sasha had admired the princess's frank, fearless manner. Sasha had even brought Cordelia home to meet her sister, forging a personal tie between the families. Over time the two households had grown close, their bonds reinforced by shared history and trust. For years they had stood as allies, united by common ideals and mutual support. Even with a magical wig, Sasha feared Cordelia's sharp eyes might still pierce her disguise. Raphael requested permission to escort the princess inside for private discussion. To buy herself safety, Sasha chose to don a fully enclosed helmet, accepting the risk of appearing foolish rather than exposed. Raphael scowled at number 87's commotion, annoyed at the distraction before his guest. He ordered her to remove the helmet immediately. Such gear was reserved for senior knights, he snapped. Sasha protested stubbornly, her defiance registered in Raphael's eyes as insolence. She stammered that she meant to wait until the princess had left before removing it, but Raphael's patience had already run out. He yanked the helmet off just as the fourth princess, Nadia, entered the courtyard. Relieved to see Raphael occupied with the escort, Sasha silently thanked Princess Nadia for the fortuitous timing. Nadia appeared fragile and pale, an infrequent sight outside the palace halls. Raphael waved Sasha forward and instructed her to continue while he attended to the guests. It was the first time Sasha had observed Nadia up close. The princess's delicate features made an impression. Sasha let out a quiet breath of relief. She had narrowly avoided exposure. Nadia paused mid-step, an odd stillness overtaking her as if she sensed something unseen. She flushed when Sasha hurriedly murmured thanks, embarrassed by the accidental aid. Sasha couldn't help wondering why both princesses had arrived together, what coincidence, or design, had brought them side by side. A small info page advertised the fan translation group's latest updates online. She silently hoped the day's duties would end early so she might steal a few hours of rest. Life remained stubbornly unkind. Master Aaron ordered the recruits to report directly to their superiors without delay. With the princesses present, security tightened. Sasha was assigned to patrol alongside Raphael. The next morning the Grand Duke's mansion wore a muted atmosphere, its halls heavy with formality. Sasha felt drained and utterly unmotivated to carry out the guard duty. Morning drills had left her exhausted, and now she faced the stern temper of Master Raphael. A dispatch from the Emperor postponed the ruins investigation and summoned Raphael to attend a birthday banquet. Sasha was relieved not to be sent west, but anxious about the required gifts, especially with Raphael in a foul mood. She endured Raphael's glare as he snapped that from now on she must remain strictly silent. Though she was growing accustomed to his volatility, Sasha still worried at the thought of crossing paths with Cordelia. She was convinced Cordelia sat in Raphael's office even now. They were clearly conferring on matters of pressing importance. As Raphael's bodyguard she could not abandon his side, all she could do was try to buy time. She would have preferred cleaning the crocodile pen or leaping through fire to standing there miserable and mute. At last the hour arrived for her to perform her duty. Wearing the helmet would draw suspicion, so she reluctantly proceeded without it. Crossing the courtyard, Sasha froze at an odd rustle coming from the hedgerow. She feared it might be Cordelia and moved to investigate to avoid an embarrassing encounter. Sasha decided to approach. If it was the princess she hoped to request training duty instead of standing guard. Her breath caught when a silhouette materialized in the distance. The figure proved to be the fourth princess, Nadia. She wondered why a princess would stroll alone in a secluded spot without any escort. Alarmed, Sasha worried for Nadia's safety. No one should wander the Grand Duke's grounds unguarded. Then she chided herself. Drawing attention would be worse. If discovered, she would be the one in trouble. A menacing rustle sounded directly behind the princess. A masked assassin lunged from the bushes, blade arcing to strike Nadia down. Panic seized Nadia as the attacker closed in with lethal intent. Sasha sprang forward, intercepting the blow. Their swords met with a shower of sparks beside the princess. The assassin recoiled at the unexpected interference while Nadia remained frozen in shock. Sasha snapped a quick question. Was the princess injured anywhere? The attacker grinned with vicious delight at anyone bold enough to block his path. He taunted that he had presumed her merely a nuisance, but her training garb had given her away. He sneered that she was only a trainee knight and ordered Nadia to step aside. The assassin mocked the lowly soldier for daring to play hero and protect the noblewoman. Gloating, he vowed to make Sasha regret meddling in affairs beyond her station. Sasha met his words with a cool retort, "Do you have anything more to say?" which visibly unsettled him. She derided him for underestimating the latent strength of the Black Dragon Knights. An assassination attempt in broad daylight on palace grounds felt surreal as she fought to defend the princess. Sasha poured everything into her strikes, determined that being caught inside the Grand Duke's mansion would be the assassin's downfall. Her eyes sharpened with resolve. Failure was not an option in this confrontation. With a precise kick she sent the attacker sprawling, leaving him dazed on the ground. She moved quickly to bind him, ensuring he had no chance to flee. Sasha stood over him, scornful. His skill was nowhere near his brazenness. As guards closed in, she wondered who had sent him and what motive lay behind the attempt. Varan and nearby knights rushed over at the sound of the clash to assess the situation. Sasha reported to Varan that she had neutralized the threat. He said he would alert their superiors and told her to rest. She reminded Varan to summon extra attendants and guards to tend to the princess. Watching Nadia tremble, Sasha realized how deeply the frail princess had been shaken. Sasha stepped forward and assured Nadia the threat had been stopped and the attacker was in custody. Nadia recoiled at the sight of blood on Sasha's hands. Sasha, still breathless, hadn't yet noticed her own injury. She rushed an apology for her abruptness, mortified that her actions had only further alarmed the princess. Flustered, Nadia insisted the wound proved Sasha had saved her, then offered to examine it herself. With gentle hands, the princess tore a strip from her ribbon and carefully bound Sasha's cut. Nadia thanked the knight earnestly for risking her life, leaving Sasha oddly embarrassed by the sincere gratitude. Before Nadia could say more, Raphael's cold, furious voice cut through the courtyard. He brusquely hauled Sasha aside, visibly displeased to find her so close to the princess. He berated her for appearing disordered before royalty and ordered her to compose herself at once. Nadia flinched at his sudden intrusion, shrinking back from the harshness in his tone. Raphael's face hardened, every line betraying his clear displeasure with the scene. Sasha felt a jolt of alarm at the Grand Duke's steely, unforgiving manner. Though still a trainee, Sasha's pride was stung by his public rebuke. He demanded she bow and accept blame. Nadia, feeling contrite, insisted she was unharmed and offered to escort Sasha to receive proper treatment. Raphael politely declined the princess's offer, saying he would take Sasha himself, a gesture that made him seem stranger and more intimidating than usual. He scolded Sasha as weak and useless for being injured by a mere assailant, dismissing her training as wasted effort. He ordered that once healed she must double her training regimen, leaving Sasha to lament her fate out loud. Cordelia's sudden call startled Sasha into a sharp, involuntary jump. Cordelia hurried over, voice urgent as she pressed Nadia for details about the attack. Sasha edged back, desperate to remain unseen and silently begging Cordelia not to recognize her battered state. Hearing Nadia credit a trainee with saving her, Sasha wished the earth would swallow her. Scrutiny from Cordelia terrified her. Cordelia offered thanks with graceful poise, Sasha could only mutter that she had acted out of duty. Cordelia's sharp gaze pinned Sasha like a needle, sending ice through her veins. Panic fluttered in Sasha's chest. One slip of voice or a visible wound could expose her true identity. She cursed herself for mentioning the wound and inwardly prayed for invisibility. When Cordelia asked about the injury, Sasha hastily downplayed it as trivial and non-threatening. Fortune favored her. Cordelia overlooked the wound, and a subordinate soon reported the assassin was ready for questioning. Raphael received confirmation that the captive was prepared for interrogation and the procedures were in place. His expression went ice cold. Raphael signaled a zero-tolerance sweep to root out conspirators. He instructed Sasha to rest at the infirmary and assured her they would summon her if her testimony proved necessary. As she withdrew, Sasha consoled herself that, at the very least, the immediate danger had been averted. That night Raphael sat alone in his study, turning the incident over in his mind. He reread the incident report and noticed anomalies that hinted at a deeper, calculated plot. He was aghast at the thought anyone would stoop to using his own daughter as a political pawn. Investigations revealed the assassin was an agent placed by the Emperor, embedded within Nadia's guard. Raphael pieced together the Emperor's design, staged Nadia's death to pin the blame on him and justify sending him to the Western Front. Sasha's timely intervention had unraveled that lethal scheme, preventing the staged catastrophe. Raphael pondered whether Sasha's presence that day was mere chance or part of a larger gambit. Could this have been another subtle trap meant to lull him into complacency? Her behavior was bafflingly inconsistent, naive one moment, eerily composed the next, leaving him unsettled. Seeing Sasha's guileless smile only deepened his suspicion. Who was she beneath that innocent mask? Her ambiguous identity made it difficult for him to place trust in her actions or motives. All the more troubling was her swordsmanship, skills far beyond what a typical trainee should possess. He recalled Sasha's offhand remark that heroes were merely ordinary people and dismissed it as naive, yet the thought nagged at him. The comment lingered in his mind like an itch he couldn't scratch, leaving him quietly disquieted. He scolded himself for dwelling on such irrational suspicions. Regardless, Sasha was in his charge now. He would not let her slip away. Raphael resolved to uncover her true motives, however long the investigation took. The next morning at the training ground, tension simmered under the soldiers' measured movements. Curious, Sasha asked Brandon what had stirred such a commotion among the knights. Brandon leaned close and murmured the confidential tidings he'd just learned. The news stunned Sasha. She gasped aloud in disbelief. She could not fathom that they would bury the assassination despite the culprit's confession. Deputy Commander Idris then appeared, abruptly cutting their whispering short. Idris' voice snapped orders for silence and focus. He intended to supervise the training personally. Sasha realized the official cover protected the royal family's honor while concealing a deeper conspiracy. She understood that had she not intervened, Nadia would have been killed and Raphael punished by the Emperor. The Emperor's willingness to sacrifice his own daughter chilled Sasha to the bone. If Raphael were dispatched west, Ethan would likely be pulled along, shattering Sasha's plans. She fretted because she'd promised Idris to stay discreet. This time she'd overstepped that pledge. Lost in those thoughts, she started when Idris called her name. Idris informed her curtly that the Grand Duke requested her presence in his office. A cold knot of panic tightened in Sasha's stomach. She sensed trouble looming. No sooner had she entered than Raphael ordered her, icily, to tidy the room immediately. Sasha stood motionless, incredulous that she'd been summoned only to perform menial labor. Surveying a mountain of dusty tomes, she asked incredulously if she was expected to clear them all alone. She protested that she was a knight, not a housemaid, but Raphael dismissed the complaint without concern. Resigned and resentful, Sasha grabbed a feather duster and began the thankless task. She grumbled as she worked, longing only to return home to her siblings. Suddenly Raphael closed the distance and demanded to know why she had detoured through the garden instead of heading straight to the office. The proximity flushed Sasha. Raphael pressed her for a truthful explanation. He insisted she explain why she lingered in the garden rather than fulfilling her duties. Sasha scrambled for a believable excuse, her thoughts tangled in panic. She came perilously close to confessing she was actually Charlotte, avoiding Cordelia. Raphael narrowed his eyes and asked pointedly whether she had known the princess was there and sought her out deliberately. He suggested, with a cold edge, that her innocent manner was a calculated ploy to curry favor with Nadia. Sasha recoiled at the unfounded insult, stunned by his insinuations. She protested fiercely, insisting she had no such manipulative intent. When Raphael remained unconvinced, Sasha resorted to a desperate last stratagem. She lied that she'd been delivering flowers to the Grand Duke at someone's request. Raphael paused and asked who had sent her. Silently, Sasha mouthed an apology to Idris. She planned to pin the story on him to deflect blame. At the mention of Idris, Raphael's expression softened fractionally. She explained that Idris, aware of her duties to the Grand Duke, had instructed her to comply unquestioningly. Though not entirely convinced, Raphael let the matter drop for the moment. Sasha breathed, eager to slip away. He mandated that from now on she must report everything to him before meeting anyone. She flushed with embarrassment. Raphael treated her possessively, despite the fact she already loved another. Sasha remembered that in the original tale the Grand Duke and Idris shared an intimate, well-known bond. The nobility were aware of their closeness, so when she feigned being Raphael's paramour, Idris had played along without protest. Raphael repeated her earlier words aloud, leaving her mortified and wishing she could disappear. He couldn't hide the satisfaction on his face at seeing her trapped. Raphael announced the princesses would depart at dawn the next day. Sasha felt a pang of disappointment that Cordelia would leave sooner than expected and they would lose their easy conversations. He went quiet, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. He asked if she was saddened by the princess's departure. She denied it too quickly to be convincing. In that instant Sasha's mind snapped to a startling realization. Raphael pressed, asking whether her concern was actually for him. She, in a moment of vanity, imagined her own worth. Surely Raphael feared another night stealing her away. With a teasing edge, Sasha retorted she wouldn't leave until she found Ethan, so he had no cause for jealousy. Raphael's tone turned dangerous as he threatened to make her redo the entire office cleaning from scratch. Her face drained of color, she fell silent and plunged back into her work, hands trembling. He watched her in stern silence, cataloging every flinch and misstep. Rewind an hour, the princesses were scheduled to leave within the hour. Nadia had confided she wished to meet the knight who'd risked her life. Raphael curtly denied the request, his refusal edged with cold finality. He sensed, perhaps rightly, that Sasha had captured Nadia's affections in that moment. He stated firmly that the meeting was out of the question, much to Nadia's astonishment. Nadia stared, shocked by her cousin's unusually severe stance. Citing military confidentiality, Raphael refused and asked the princess to accept his apology. Back in the present, Sasha couldn't shake the question of why he had reacted so strongly. She wondered if his concern stemmed from fearing the loss of a rare talent, or from deeper doubts about who she really was. Days after the princesses departed, Sasha's routine slowly settled back into its grooves. Then she was summoned once more to the Grand Duke's reception room. She knocked politely and asked permission to enter. To her surprise, the room's occupant was not who she expected. Idris sat waiting, composed and already attentive to her arrival. She stepped back instinctively, then Idris waved her in. Raphael was still preparing, he explained. Hesitant but relieved, Sasha entered at his invitation. She asked about the telegram she'd asked Idris to send to Albrecht. When Idris confirmed a reply had arrived, joy bubbled up inside her. Idris examined the letter while Sasha mouthed grateful thanks to Johann for his swift response. She felt so uplifted she imagined hugging Johann the moment she was free of this place. Idris watched the rapid shift in her mood with a quiet, unreadable appraisal. He teased that he hadn't seen her slipping into his private baths lately. She laughed it off, claiming she'd grown shy and found another place to bathe in private. Idris pointed out how she'd used his name to dodge Cordelia and to justify saving Nadia. He teased that she'd even borrowed his identity to smooth things over with Raphael, prompting an awkward smile. He told her she could come by his room to bathe without embarrassment whenever she liked. Raphael entered unexpectedly and asked, sharp, why they appeared so familiar with one another. Watching Raphael's displeasure, Sasha mused privately that he truly cared for Idris. Panic pricked at her. What if his look was jealousy over her closeness to Idris? She felt pulled to smooth things over between the two men before tensions escalated. Without thinking, Sasha dropped to her knees and claimed full responsibility for the misunderstanding. Both men stared, baffled by the sudden display and unsure how to respond. She spun a tale that she'd sought Idris's advice to better understand Raphael, nothing more. She insisted they'd merely talked too long and been misread. There had been no impropriety between them. Idris smoothly played along, promising to ensure it never happened again and urging Raphael to compose himself. Sasha clung to Raphael's leg, swearing blind devotion to him alone. His annoyance was obvious as he ordered her to release him. When she asked if he believed her, Raphael replied coolly that his trust lay only with Idris. She inwardly mocked Raphael's romantic faith in Idris, then readied herself to join the inspection. She froze when told she would be dragged along on the inspection as well. The party moved toward the bustling quarter by the manor to review the Merchants' Guild. After days confined indoors, Sasha breathed in the city's open air with visible delight. Her stomach growling, she eagerly invited Idris to share a meal with her. Idris replied curtly that the inspection wasn't finished and they would eat with the others afterward. She felt deflated by Idris's seriousness and strict sense of duty. Sasha wondered why Raphael had slipped away for a private meeting after promising she could accompany him. Resigned, she continued the patrol with Idris despite the ache in her empty stomach. A familiar voice praising a merchant's blade made her head snap toward the sound. Panic jolted through her when she realized her master stood nearby. She frantically scanned for cover, terrified he might recognize her. She slipped behind Idris and hissed for him to stay perfectly still. In her panic she clutched the hem of Idris's coat as if it were a lifeline. She pressed herself to his side, using his tall frame as a shield. Idris covered her mouth with a gloved hand and commanded silence. Her master passed by without glancing their way. Even after he moved on, Sasha's hands trembled and her heart raced. She realized, gratefully, that Idris had intentionally shielded her identity. Idris murmured that the danger had passed and she could step away now. She mouthed a silent, heartfelt thank you to him for averting the disaster of exposure. Only when the adrenaline ebbed did her legs give way beneath her. Startled, she stumbled and ended up in an awkward, compromising tangle with Idris. Footsteps approached and Raphael's voice cut through the street, asking what was happening. Raphael folded his arms, unimpressed and visibly displeased by the scene before him. She scrambled to explain, insisting it was a misunderstanding. She'd simply lost her footing. Fear gnawed at her. Had all her efforts to dispel his suspicions been in vain? Without a word of comfort, Raphael ordered her to follow him. He told Idris to remain and finish the inspection while he escorted Sasha to the meeting. Her mind raced. Was Raphael jealous, trying to separate her from Idris? She blurted that Raphael could go with Idris if he wanted. She couldn't be of use anyway. Raphael replied curtly that it was an order, not a suggestion, stripping her of choice. As they walked, Sasha began outlining her concern that red diamonds were becoming as common as pebbles. These stones were a rare mineral newly extracted from the Grand Duke's own mines. Their striking beauty had captivated the nobility and transformed the region's economy. Maurice, the Merchants Guild leader, flew into a rage at her suggestion to abandon the mine. He seized her coat and spat an accusation that she was an imperial spy. Raphael snapped for Maurice to release her at once. Maurice accused her of brazenly lying about the red diamond's value decline. He charged that she had come prepared to sabotage the meeting. Sasha fell silent, searching for a way to make her argument persuasive and calm the crowd. She explained the red diamond in her possession was payment intended to hire soldiers from the east. Maurice rejected the claim outright, branding it an outrageous fabrication. She challenged Raphael. Did he understand the geological conditions required for red diamonds to form? Sasha took a breath and moved straight to the core of her argument to vindicate herself. She explained that the red diamonds appeared because the mine sat in a hot, arid zone where a six-legged insect from the east thrived. Raphael frowned, asking what link insects from the east could possibly have to gemstone formation. Sasha dropped the bombshell. The red diamonds originated from the insect's waste, not traditional mineral processes. For a stunned moment Raphael simply stood there, unable to reconcile the claim with his expectations. She added that the waste, when exposed to dusk light, crystallized into gemstones within a week. Hot easterly winds carried swarms of those insects into the region, accidentally seeding the mine with the material. Maurice exploded, calling the explanation the most absurd fabrication he had ever encountered.